Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. About, 4 or 5 months ago, I was perusing through the internet as you do, going down the rabbit hole, learning all the stuff that we need to know in order to carry on with the work that I'm doing here. And I came across a fascinating interview with a chap who was telling us about the debts that we have and how we can get out of them. And of course, having debts myself, like most of us in the debtors world that we're in, I thought this sounds interesting. And he was talking about a book that he had released called, the title is unimportant, How to Get Out of Debt Without Paying a Single Penny. And of course, I had to rush out. Well, I rushed online and purchased the book. And it is fascinating. The author has written another book, which is hopefully coming out very soon, which I understand is even more powerful than this. But this is a real eye-opener, especially if, like me, you've had debt collectors banging on the door trying to take away your property and intimidating you. To get into this, we're going to talk to the author, Paul, and he's in a cafe, and the sound quality isn't brilliant, so bear with us because it's going to be an absolutely brilliant interview, I know. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you on here, and first of all, thank you for writing the book, because it's put my mind at rest about the powers that these enforcement agencies, these debt collectors, have when they come hammering on your door and make you feel this small, and they're going to take away your property to furnish a debt, especially if it's a debt you didn't even know you had, like with these ULEZ and clean air zones that we've got now, which is a nightmare. So first of all, let's find out a little bit about you. How did you come about writing a book about debt and finding the ways out of it, which seem actually, on the face of it, really, apart from the bit of letter writing and due diligence, quite simple?
It is quite simple, but the path to get to that simplicity was difficult. I started looking at contract law when I was a musician, and we used to tour all over the place. And when you're driving through Europe in a tour bus for 9 hours to get to the next gig, there's not a lot to do, and you just read. And once you've got through Star Wars and David Eddings and all the rest of it, J.R.R. Tolkien, where do you turn?
Yes, well, you turned to contract law, obviously.
Well, I did, because, well, I don't even know I was led to it, but I started reading these 4-inch thick legal tomes, and it was fascinating. But I've always had a strong sense of justice, and I thought, well, this is gonna educate me on what's actually going on and what I can do about it, because up to that point, your average guy doesn't have a clue what to do in terms of getting it back or getting one over on them when in your heart that the situation's wrong. And everybody goes through that. Everybody goes through a situation. How many times have you seen people come out of the court and they're on the steps and they'll say, well, that wasn't justice? Of course, it's not justice. It's not justice, it's just us.
Yes. And we've seen so much in recent times in which there is more of this injustice going on. People pushing back against the council tax, the entrapment on the motorways, and these clean air zones and ULEZ and stuff, in which there's no victim, and it is just a cash generating system these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The book after this one might go some way to explaining why that is, but we're into spiritual territory at that point.
Right.
Far beyond the remit of this talk.
So, well, let's go back to this one for the time being, because you start really with the banks and money creation, which is, we have sort of, the audience will sort of vaguely know some of this, but it's certainly well worth reiterating some of this, of how money is created effectively out of thin air, although we're the instrument that create it.
Well, we're not the instrument, the banks are the instrument.
Right.
We're the originators of the energy, and as we know, everything in this world is based in energy, vibrational energy. Um, but we need a vehicle through which to create. If it's in the commercial system, obviously you don't need a vehicle. If you're an artist and you paint pictures, you can just get on with it. But if
Yes.
you want to create something in the commercial system, you need a vehicle to do this, and that's where the person was created. The person is our commercial car. It's we get in it to do commerce, and when we get out of it, we're back to being a man or a woman. So essentially, the bank is the sort of fiduciary, the intermediary between our creating something in the commercial system, which is energy based, and it becoming tangible reality. That's the role of the bank, to convert our energy into the commercial tokens of the day.
Right. Which is the fiat currency that we use.
Yeah, yeah. But as we know, they've considerably overstepped that remit in recent years.
Yes. We end up with paper promissory notes, which is only held on belief, really. So,
Yeah,
in your book, you talk about how the banks are cheating us, really, in the creation of this money that we borrow, and of course, the lower staff haven't a clue about this because of the training they've got. Could you tell
yeah.
us a bit about that?
Well, only the CEO and the immediate executive level are sort of privy to what's really happening, what the game is. Everybody below is trained to a certain degree of how to support that, how
Right.
to make that machine run smoothly. Um, Most of the people at the banks below the executive level are screwed by the bank just the same way as everyone else. Just because you work at a bank doesn't make you immune to what
No.
they do.
So part of what you're saying is
So,
to educate the
yeah, it's
the sorry, there's a bit of delay on the line. So part of what you're doing is also educating those people at the street level, shall we say, to the some of the fraud that's going on, because they haven't a clue and they're just endorsing it.
yeah, connection's just gone terrible. Um,
Can you have we got you back?
yeah, we still got the video. Okay, looks like we're back. So yeah, the the level that staff are trained to is just enough to be able to perform their role.
Yes,
But obviously, they're also food for the machine as well.
absolutely. So we get into debt quite easily, and your book is about very much about the process, and you give us lots of case histories of where you've actually been writing back and rebutting certain things and asking for clarity more than anything else, it seems.
Yeah,
Tell us about the role of that clarity, because that's where things they either can't answer those questions or they daren't.
yeah. Well, it's both. But I need to backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
Those case studies are mine. They're my case studies, and there's a lot more of that. But it stretches back years, and I
Yes.
don't necessarily have the the paper trail to show like I have with these. What happened was with the lockdowns, um, I realised that there was a there was a herd of elephants coming over the hill as far as people losing money, not being able to make money, all the rest of it.
Mm.
And I thought, well, if I'm going to do anything, because I used to help people personally with all this, and I've got a lot of case studies from that as well. But I realised that this was going to be a big deal with the COVID lockdowns. So I thought, if I'm going to get this information out there, I need to write a book, and I need to do it now. So the case studies that I've put in the book, they were ongoing accounts at the time I made this decision. And I realized that in order for me to have a consecutive series of letters and correspondence to and fro, I needed to end those accounts quite quickly to be able to start the process to then feed the book.
Yes.
So, I mean, a lot of them are quite low amounts, but this is why I couldn't go back to the older stuff that I'd done and all the other accounts because I didn't have the paperwork, and I certainly don't have it now because I'm on a boat. So I had to go with what I had. So I ended those accounts. I brought them to a close, started the process, and that's why the account case studies are relatively recent. It was just something that I needed as research material to include in the book.
Yes. But they clearly
Now,
demonstrate.
to answer the yeah,
Yeah.
it's
They
the same
clearly
process,
yeah.
absolutely the same process. But to answer the question about the banks, they can't admit to this by answering questions because the game would be up quite quickly at that point. So not only can they not answer them, they won't answer them, and they will use every method of prevarication they can employ just to sidestep, how did you do this? And this all works in our favour.
Yeah, because you don't want to get them. They don't want to get into court where it becomes on the public record of what they're actually doing.
Yeah. Well, a judge is likely to ask them, produce your ledger. Let's get the answers to these questions. Because the questions that are being asked are not sensitive in their nature at all. They're all pertaining to our accounts.
Yes.
We don't want to see, off-ledger secret banking stuff. We just want to see the stuff that pertains to our accounts. So it's not sensitive. It's our information. We already know most of it. But what we don't know is what they're doing behind the scenes with our account.
Yes.
Our account. Yeah. It's not our account. It's the bank's account. That's why they can express the rules and change the terms and conditions whenever they like, because it's not our account.
One of the things you talk about is contract law, and we mentioned that you've read these great big tomes.
It's all I talk about. It's so boring to sit with me.
Is it? Well, but to people who don't know this is why it's fascinating. And prior to recording, we were just talking about the education system. In fact, that stuff is just not taught to us because we don't know this stuff. And although it may well be very boring to you, a lot of people are waking up now and going, oh, contract law, commerce, what are the rules? And you mention in the book, and you go into it in. I have to say, your writing style is very readable. It's so easy, and it is lovely because sometimes you get books which are sort of a bit, hard to go, and you go, what do they mean by this? But it's very, very clear, and that's what I really love about it. But you talk about the contract law, and you talk about the various things that you need for contracts, and when you mention those, and I'll get you to maybe mention a few in a second, you suddenly realize that so many of the agreements and contracts that we've acquiesced to, they're not obeying any of these laws. So could you tell us what?
Yeah, pretty much most modern contracts are void before you leave the office. They're not worth anything. And it's because, as you said, there's certain pillars that are required. I didn't decide what they were. The legal system didn't decide what they were. The banking system decided what they were. Now, one of those is full disclosure. And in any agreement, both parties or all parties involved are required to disclose all material facts that could affect the contract. Now, if it's later found out that something wasn't disclosed, then the contract's void. That's simple. Consideration is another big deal in contract law. If I'm borrowing something from somebody, then they are lending something that's theirs, and I've got to lodge my consideration of equal value, so that there's a meeting in the middle of their property and my property. In the event that I don't pay, they keep my property,
Yes.
that's a lien. That's your standard commercial lien. When you take your car for repair, once they've done the work, if if you don't pay them, I mean, even if it's only a 50 quid repair, might be on a £18,000 Mercedes, but if you don't pay that 50 quid, they have a mechanics lien that they can apply to that car, and you don't get it back till you've paid them.
So, and yeah, so and they've got the right then to sell the car if necessary, to so that they get their 50 quid.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which, funny enough, is the same excuse the bailiffs gave to me, or the enforcement officers, as they like to be called, to say, well, we're going to sell your van so that we can get our bit. And I said, well, it's a hell of an expensive van for your one little fee.
Yeah, let me stop you with that one. It's not that they like to be called enforcement officers. It's that by law they are not allowed to be called bailiffs because they're not bailiffs.
Ah, because they don't work for the court.
A bailiff has an oath of office.
Right. And these are
He's
third
required,
party
he's
thugs.
required to produce it if you ask for it.
Yes. Well,
So yeah, they don't like being called bailiffs because it's a fraud. If they say
right.
they're
Yeah.
bailiffs, they're committing fraud because they're not bailiffs.
Very interesting. I'll talk to you about that in a second. Let's just finish off with the contract stuff. So yes, consideration is the other one. Is one of the
Yep.
five. I think there are five principles.
There can be 500.
Oh right.
It's whatever the parties agree to during the
Yes.
formation of the contract.
Right.
But as a bare minimum, you're looking at consideration, full disclosure, meeting of the minds, capacity to contract, about four or five. They're the essentials. Now, this was decided probably 300 years ago in the law, legal terms that are used today in the courts. And very, very serious people, Lord Chief Justices, bachelors of law, professors of law, all these guys, they've all acknowledged that this is the way contracting must be done to make it fair and above board for all concerned. So it's not some sort of flimsy, lightweight set of, okay, we've got to look at these parameters. They're actually, carved in stone, these
Yes.
requirements.
So when you get contracts that we all agree with, say with our, I don't know, a utility bill or a mobile phone bill, and then they turn around and they say, "Oh, we've updated our terms and conditions."
Voided contract.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember negotiating those upgraded terms and conditions with you.
Once a contract has been agreed and signed by all parties, that's it. There are no
Right.
changes. There are no changes. If you want to make a change to it, then you must bring all the parties together again, submit the change, and then form a new contract. But the old
Yes.
contract with all the signatures doesn't contain
Anything
any
new.
part of the new thing, so it can't possibly cover it.
Can they put in such agreements
No,
that
I
they
know what you're
are,
asking.
yeah, that they can upgrade
No,
as and when? No, they can't.
no. Everything must be stated. This is full disclosure. Everything must
Yes.
be stated. So
Wow. So
you can't say we reserve the right to change the contract at a whim. What would
yes.
be the point of the contract?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
If it's a
So,
free for all for everyone, then there's no point.
which presumably is why they love to contract you every year or every couple of years, because then they can change it legitimately. But if somebody said that we've updated our terms and conditions of a contract, you basically can say, well, that's void. I'm not paying you.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
that's pretty
That's
much
really,
it.
yeah. So a lot of people are probably in that situation,
Yeah,
completely oblivious.
the big one for doing that is bank accounts. You get 3 or 4 notices a year saying we've changed some of the contracts of the agreement. They do it all the time.
Well, I've been with my bank, I don't know what, 25 years, something like that, possibly. And over that time, there must be hundreds of changes because they're always,
Yeah,
upgrading
yeah,
something and you end up paying more.
yeah,
So effectively, all of that is null and void.
yeah.
How would you challenge
Well,
that?
there's no need to challenge it as long as the bank account still functions the way you
Right.
want.
Yes.
But that
Yes.
also sort of touches on what I said earlier. Um, if they start changing the terms and conditions of the account without your input or agreement, whose bank account is it?
Well, yes, that's very true. Because the pair of you, one of you is taking advantage of the other. Oh, that is very fascinating.
Yeah,
So let's go down the road then that for whatever reason you've defaulted on a payment,
yeah.
and it may be that you believe that the payment is wrong, that they've changed as you've just described, or as we've seen recently with the council tax, they're not able to produce a liability order that's actually signed by a magistrate, and you've defaulted on it anyway, and what happens then is it's passed on to a third party enforcement agency, and they either write to you or they come and knocking on the door, which they have done to me.
Mm.
How much power do they have?
Um, as much as you give them.
Yes. I mean, having read that particular, that was the first chapter I went to be honest, because I knew that I thought, well, how much power do they have? But absolutely. So it could be the same as a burger chain or a clothing store just banging on your door and saying, well, we want some money from you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what's the first question that you ask if somebody totally out of the blue stops you in the street and says, "Have you got that 100 quid?" First question: Who are you? Who are
Yes,
you, and why do I owe you that money?
absolutely. Yes.
But
And
it's
so,
just you just apply the same thing to these other companies, especially debt collectors, because another part of contracting states that all parties involved in the contract are the only parties involved in the contract.
so
So
when it's sold to a third party, they do not have that contract with you. And
no,
you
they
can
were not.
ask them,
Yeah, they're not named in the original contract.
yes. So you can say, well, where is your name in the contract?
Yeah,
And as it's not there, bye
yeah,
bye.
yeah, yeah,
I have
pretty much.
no more business with you.
Yeah,
One of the threats that they often do, or the things that they do, which is unlawful, it seems to me, is they'll put a clamp on your car or they'll threaten to tow it away. And in some cases, they have towed it away.
mm.
And
Well, you've got to back up with that one. It's not your car.
right, okay.
If it's wearing DVLA badges, that's the owner. If it
So,
was your
but
car, you'd be able to express the rules around it, and you wouldn't be wearing the badges of another corporation.
okay, and so yeah, people do say that, and I'm with you on that. But that still is not their car.
It's not the debt collector's car.
No, so they would still have no right to take the DVLA's car
Well,
from you, would they?
I've not really got into it, but they've got this weird thing going on where they think if they buy a debt or engage in some contractual arrangement with DVLA, that they've got the authority to remove the car. Whether that's right or not, what is right is that you don't have authority over the car. Because they split the title. When you register it, it splits the title.
Yes.
I mean, this is so far out of my remit, it's untrue. But they split the title. So you get the res, the actual thing, and they get the title. And it's the title holder, the deed holder, that owns the property. so you get to use it.
Right. So that's why, I mean, I guess a car is easy picking for them because it's on a public street. If it's on a public street, if
Yeah,
it's on a private drive, they've got to trespass
yeah,
to it.
yeah.
But that doesn't stop them either.
No, no. Filming them tends to slow them down massively,
Yes.
um, because at the end of the day, the finance, they only act on the finance. If you stop paying, then they'll appear.
Right.
So it's totally finance driven. Well, the finance is imaginary, as we know, and the energy that was given to create the finance was yours. So I mean, you could sort of argue that they're operating ultra vires, which is beyond the scope of the contract, because ultimately it was your energy that created that whole situation. So
Yeah.
what are they doing there?
Well, exactly. I'm not quite sure that they would understand all of that
No chance.
themselves.
No chance. No chance. I'm now in a position where, or not in a position, but I'm of the understanding now that it's better to let them do all these things and then go back over it afterwards, prove all the law, prove everything contractually, financially, and all the rest of it, and then get to the point of the conclusion, which is they have broken so many laws, breached so much legislation, and now we want our remedy.
Right.
And
Which
that,
would
what I've just said there, is a total encapsulation of what the new book's all about.
Oh, right. Well, we look forward to the new book. But this is, I mean, what is great about your first book is it does take away a lot of the fear. Not so much about the car as I was hoping it would, but in terms
Yeah.
of other things, that you and you're using the other thing is that you're using a lot of paperwork to do the fight.
Not a lot of paperwork.
Well,
Try getting into a court case with a solicitor.
well, yes, yes. No,
That's a lot of paperwork.
yeah, no, I suppose you're using the might of the pen. Let me rephrase
Yeah.
myself then. You're using the
Yeah.
might of the pen to ask questions, to clarify, and as we
Yeah.
said at the beginning, to ask questions which they can't answer or won't answer or both.
But we already know that, and that's
Yes.
precisely why we're asking those questions, because they
Yes,
flush
exactly.
out the fraud.
And then they
So,
then they basically go silent.
yeah. Yeah. So it's all based in words. Words are, they say that the pen is mightier than the sword.
Mm.
Well, what happens if you put an S in front of word?
You get sword, of course. It is all in the words.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's all word salad at the end of the day.
So your next book, which I remember when I watched the interview, said it's a bit more of a bigger bombshell on
Yeah.
more of the fraud, and
Yeah.
that will be out
Well,
in February.
the, the, this will actually be my third book on contract law. The first book is called Poking Crocodiles, um, and it's fiction, and it's got three characters that go up against the banking system. And basically, what they're doing is they're using everything that I've discovered through all this contract law reading. Um, and once you've done that, you move on to the title is unimportant, which is designed to get people out of a sticky situation where the money's just flying out of the house and you've got nothing left and you're still
Mm.
not making ends meet. So the first book was designed to stop that so that you keep money in your pocket and you've got cash flow. But the problem with that was I was always sort of falling short of getting remedy, because we know what they've done. We know that they've taken us for a ride and they've extracted a lot of energy from us in the form of commercial tokens. But at the time that I wrote that book, I didn't actually have the remedy to it squared away properly. I had an idea, but I hadn't done enough research on it. So in the last year or so, I've gone really deep with a researcher called John Kelso, who is like a terrier with a bone. And between us, we've gone through all the legislation, or all the pertinent legislation that applies, and we've actually come up with a system using their rules and applying it directly by our person. We can actually force the bank into a situation where they've got to capitulate. So this new book, it's called The Big Stick, because that's literally what it is. We can apply it and get restitution for what they've done. Now, as it stands at the moment, because I left England because I bought a yacht, I went sailing. I didn't get a chance to test it all, but John is testing it as we speak. So it's kind of largely theoretical, but the bonus in that is that it's all taken from current legislation and law. So if it fails, then it will demonstrate that the law has failed, and they're not going to allow that to happen. That cannot be seen to happen. So it should work like a charm, because it's based in law, in legislation. There's nothing in there that isn't in the legal textbooks, the legislation itself, and the common law. So, I've not created this from thin air. I've taken this from
unlike money,
well settled.
Yeah.
It's well settled. So I'm pretty confident that it's going to do the job and actually get us to a point of clawing back everything that they've taken from us. And because it's a fraud, there's no statute of limitation. Fraud is endless. You can go back as far as you want. So,
yes, there's a maxim of law that says that. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but I remember a previous guest telling us that.
Yeah. I'm not too big on maxims because it's based in Roman law, and Roman law is changeable on a whim, shall we say.
Is it?
Well, who knows? Who can verify it? We weren't there.
Well, that's true. What about canon law? I mean, that's the same thing.
Probably worse.
Well,
it comes out of the Vatican, doesn't it? Canon law. So
yes.
I wouldn't touch it with your hands. So I stick with what we know, what we can prove, and what we can test. So there's no conjecture involved. This is purely taken from the law books, and there's loads of case law precedents. There's a lot going on with it, so I'm quite confident.
Well, we do look forward to that book to join the Poking Crocodiles, which I think you said is the first one, which is a fictional one. The title is where did your title come? As in, the title is unimportant. Where did that come from?
It was probably, I don't know for sure, but because I'm a contrary git, it was probably something along the lines of what the book's called is completely irrelevant. It's what it contains that you need to be concerned about.
Yes. I mean, the main message here is how to get out of debt without paying a single penny.
Yeah.
Other than the postage stamp or the rather exorbitant special delivery that they now charge about £7 here.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, put it on a card.
Put it on a card and then claim the money back later on.
Put it on a card, then discharge the card. All my law books have been bought on credit cards.
Have they?
I've got lots of benefactors for my education. You do say in here sort of, it is important to act honourably, and that's very much a spiritual thing as well. Yeah. The thing is, if you're standing in honour, there is no higher position. They can only match it, and if they match it, then let's do the business. We're happy to do the business.
Yes.
But it's unlikely that they can match it as long as they've employed what you need from the outset.
and they do, and loads of. I mean, so much of this is coming out now, and more and more. What will happen if everybody was doing what you do, by writing and asking these questions? The whole financial system would collapse a bit, wouldn't it?
No, it won't collapse at all. They've got to rejig their game and get back to the original remit of a bank, which is to facilitate
Yes.
the change of our energy into commercial purposes of the day. It's like this thing with the credit rating. We always have the highest credit rating score, all of us, because we are the creators.
Yes.
We provide the energy to keep this system turning. So how can you say that your energy is not good enough? You know, if you've got a pulse and you're engaged in commercial activity, then you've got the highest credit rating.
Right.
What
Because
they
without
do
us, there's nothing.
exactly. So if everybody withdrew from the banking system, then
Right. Then it would collapse.
because there's no more energy going in. Yeah, there's no energy going in to feed it. But the way this is hopefully going to go is that if we apply for a new set of cards and give them their energy, as in a security instrument for each card, then they're going to be in a position where there's going to be a lot more commercial energy going into the banking system than there would be if you just held one card and maintained that card for 15 years, because they only receive one security instrument for that.
Right. So the more that,
So by doing it this way, they get an endless supply of security instruments, but they must be upfront and honest about it and share what's happening.
Right, which is what they're not doing at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's
everybody would benefit at that level. Banks not quite so much as they have been, but they would survive.
Well, I would definitely recommend the book. It has been a great read, and I'm going to go through some of the test cases that you've got in here, which is fascinating. I mean, it's just fascinating the sort of responses that you get, and the continual sort of not listening to you and trying to fob you off, and all of that. That is fascinating, and it's great to see. I mean, the fact that you've used your own test cases, which is great and very laudable. You're not just saying it happens; you're actually demonstrating it, which is great.
They are in a spin. All the debt collectors and the banks and anyone else that's involved in it, including the credit reference agencies, they're all in a bit of a spin at the moment because they can see where this is going, and they haven't quite figured out how to respond to it yet. And we've seen, because obviously there's lots and lots. I've got a group on Facebook, which is just a hotbed of activity, private group, and everybody there is helping each other, sharing experiences, furthering the knowledge, basically. And we've seen so many changes to response letters from banks and debt collectors. You can actually see them trying to rejig the game as it's going along. And it's so fascinating, the different things that they come up with.
Yes.
At the end of the day, if they fail to answer the questions, it's a non-response. But it's nonetheless, it's interesting to see what they say.
Yes, watching them squirm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I think within a couple of years, 3 years' time, I don't think there'll be any debt collectors.
Do you? Well, that will be music to a number of people if we can just last another 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. I don't think there'll be a lot of other things as well, but that's another subject.
Another subject for another day. Well, Paul, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you. Thank you for coming and going to a public cafe to conduct the interview. I appreciate that. I know the audio hasn't been the best, but it's been a wonderful interview. The book is, the title is unimportant, How to Get Out of Debt Without Paying a Single Penny, by Paul Yates. And it is a good read, and it gives you a good grounding and takes away some of the fear, and so that you can deal with these situations, and empowers you, which is what I think we're going through on a massive scale. People are being empowered, and it is thanks to people like yourself. So well done, you.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that.
And I will put a link in. Presumably it's available from all good bookshops and all of that sort of thing.
Mainly Amazon. It's mainly online.
Right.
Yeah. I've tried to get it in bookshops, but I mean, I think publishers have to be a bit braver than they are currently to publish that book.
Yes.
I went through a lot of publishers, and they said, no, we don't want to touch that.
They'll be on the wrong side of history.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, Amazon's the main place, but Draft to Digital, they do a copy of it, but it doesn't look as nice as the Amazon one.
Right. Okay.
Quite a few others. There's a few in America, a few in the States that carry it, but I don't think they carry physical copies.
Well, it's a nice copy, and it's a great read. Thank you, Paul, for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
It has been fascinating. And to my lovely viewers, I hope you've got something out of that. Do check out the description. I'll put a link in the description. And do you have a website or anything, Paul? Or anything?
I do. It's debt-ninjas.com.
Debt-ninjas.com. I'll put that.
There's like I said earlier, there's a thriving Facebook group. There's actually two. There's a public one and a private one, and I should really pull down the public one. But it's just Debt Ninjas, and you know which is the right one because there's a weighing scale on it, the scales of justice. And there's a banker up in the air with a debt ninja holding down the other side with all the money. So that's the one, but there's filter questions on it because we want to keep out the trolls. So if anybody wants to join that group, you've got to answer the questions, otherwise it'll just automatically
kick you out. Yeah, brilliant.
It says no.
Exactly, like it often does.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll speak again when the next one.
Yes, when the next ones do come back, and we'll have another conversation. It would be wonderful, and I shall rush out and buy it. In the meantime, I'll be back with more monologues and more wonderful interviews. But thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. From Paul and myself, take care, look after yourself. Until next time, goodbye.